Hi, my name is Catherine Loveday. I'm a professor at the University of Westminster, and I also work clinically doing memory assessments for people. I did my PhD looking at healthy aging and changes that happen in memory for healthy older people, and I've continued to be very, very interested in this field. So one of the things that I really want to talk to you about today is how to kind of tell the difference between normal healthy changes that happen to us as we get older and when there is a cause for concern. And also to be aware of looking out for things that may present as a memory problem or present as a dementia or confusion, but actually may be a sign that something else is going on. And these are particularly important to be aware of in older people because it's very easy and quick for people to make assumptions. And I also want to say that I've had a lot of experience of people coming to me for assessments who have absolutely nothing to worry about and do really, really well on the assessments, but are worried about things that they're noticing in their lives. And I also want to say that the same thing happens the other way around, where a family member will suggest that somebody gets an assessment and work with them to come to me and have the assessment, and that person has passed all their assessments at the GP, but the family still feel there's a problem, and on the more detailed kinds of assessments that I do, we are able to identify that problem. And the people that is most likely to affect, and I know that this will feature in one of the other presentations, is people who are either intelligent or very well educated. And often those people will have a degree of protection and reserve and what we call cognitive reserve. That means that they are still very able to do the standard GP kind of tests like the mini mental state examination, and there's a whole range of others. They're short tests, and for many people they will pick up problems, but unfortunately, particularly in intelligent and educated people, they won't pick up the problems until much further down the line. So what are the things that you can look out for? First of all, let's talk about what's normal. It's absolutely normal to have some memory loss. Feeling forgetful is not necessarily the same as being forgetful. So we all have memory lapses all the time. Absolutely all of us. I've just done a huge study of about 800 people, and absolutely everybody reports some memory losses some of the time. But what's interesting is that because society expects us to lose our memory as we get older, and because we also particularly fear getting things like dementia, we become much more focused on memory problems that occur either to us when we're older or that we might observe in other people when they get older. So some of what we see is just a focus. It's that our focus changes and we become more worried about memory lapses that occur in older people. In fact, some recent research has shown that memory doesn't change that much. Some aspects of memory do change, but when we don't, our memory loss isn't as much as is believed. But the belief that you might have memory loss can then make us focus on it or become much more aware of small things that are otherwise normal. So it's absolutely normal for people to not be able to remember absolutely everything they had for breakfast the day before, or to forget details of things they did yesterday, to forget details of a conversation they had a few days ago, to forget to take things with them when they go out, or forget that they had a letter to post. All of those things are completely normal. It's also normal for people to become slower at working things out and need a bit longer to do things. And it's also very common that people will become more easily overwhelmed if they have to do lots of things at once. So multitasking becomes harder, but also being in a very busy environment where there are lots of noises going on, lots of distractions, that will really have an impact on people as they get older, particularly people who are much older, so people into their 80s and 90s, and particularly when they may have difficulties with hearing as well. those circumstances can make people become very withdrawn. It can make it look like they've forgotten things when they haven't, when they've just never taken them in the first place. So it's really important that we're aware that the environment and the number of things we expect people to do at once can impact on someone. It's also very, very normal to not be able to remember words. I do it all the time. I'd be very surprised if I don't do it at some point during this presentation. To not be able to find the exact word you want and to struggle to find that word is not unusual, and it's very common, and it's something that starts very early on. When it's more problematic is when people are forgetting how to name very basic things. So not being able to describe that as a watch, for example, or having changes in their word finding that really impacts on sentences on a regular basis. So that their communication starts to become more stilted. So basic word finding, not a problem, but regular word finding or word finding difficulties for very simple things may be more of an alarm bell. Names are even worse. So names are one of the first things that our memory gets bad at doing. So, and it's really difficult because in society it's one of the things we absolutely feel really, really embarrassed about, and we have to make it easier for people. We have to, I suggest that people wear name badges in any situation with older people, and actually in many situations generally. And when I say older, I mean even people in their early 40s might start to struggle with names. It's a really early thing to change, and it's something that, because it's so embarrassing, people really, really worry about it. And the more they worry about it, the harder the task becomes. So it's really not something that people should worry about. I suppose if somebody forgets the name of their husband or their own child, then maybe that's something, again, to be a bit more concerned about. It's also true that people can get more easily tired. Now, I just come back to this concept of cognitive reserve to kind of point out that we have to be very aware that in people who are intelligent and well educated, they may not present as having problems until quite a long way through having some kind of dementia. However, even in those people, you will start to see the things that I think are a cause for concern. So we can take my mum as an example. I managed to assess and diagnose her dementia 10 years before she would have been identified as having dementia by her GP. She now does have a formal diagnosis and is quite a lot further down that road, but I was way, way ahead of it. And I was ahead of it because I knew what kinds of things I was looking for. So the sorts of things that you might look out for is somebody getting lost in a familiar surrounding. So going somewhere that they've gone lots of times before. And then, for example, let's say they regularly walk to their local supermarket, but then there's some kind of diversion and they have to go in a different direction, and they suddenly feel like they don't know where they are, or they take a much longer route than they need to. So becoming lost in a place that people know is something to be concerned about. Any kind of significant memory losses, so things that really impact on everyday life. So, for example, I know that in one of the other presentations there's an example of somebody going and doing a presentation and then forgetting where they're supposed to be staying and completely forgetting the name of their hotel. That kind of thing. Also, I've had patients come in who've been completely forgotten they're supposed to be going on holiday. And so big kind of life events that seem to be completely forgotten, and those are things that are really starting to impact on everyday life. Those are the things that you might want to be aware of as well. Also, any kind of forgetting that's very short. So if you have a conversation with someone, then within minutes they are repeating themselves or don't seem to be aware of what you've said, that is a sign that there is a problem there. So when someone is repeating themselves, not saying something that they said to you yesterday and repeating it again, that isn't always going to be a sign, because particularly if someone's telling a story about something that's happened to them, they might have told 20 people in a day, but then forgotten who they said that story to. But if you sort of frequently find that somebody's repeating themselves, and particularly when the time scale is short, then again, something to be concerned about. If people stop being able to, and again, another early sign is people no longer being able to take part in book clubs or or film clubs, things that they've done quite often. And in those situations where they are struggling to follow a narrative and struggling to keep up with a story that's ongoing, again, what we're showing there is that the brain isn't being able to hold material over any kind of short period of time. The other things to look out for are any sudden changes. So if there's a sudden change in someone's memory functioning or their ability to concentrate, or there's sudden changes in their behaviour or personality, again, that's a kind of a red flag to look out for. And of course, any other neurological symptoms that somebody might develop, such as a tremor. Before you jump to the conclusion, if you see those kind of things going on, before we jump to any conclusion that means they have dementia, we also need to be aware of some of the alternative explanations. So the kinds of things that I would always look out for or suggest that a GP follows up is whether there may be something like a motor neuron disease or a tumour. Both of those can sometimes present initially with memory problems. So it's really important because the treatments for those things are going to be very different. There's another medical condition called normal pressure hydrocephalus. Usually in that case, people would also present with some balance problems and maybe some incontinence. And strokes, of course. Sometimes a very small stroke, a mini silent stroke can have occurred, which may mean that if people get on the right medication, they can keep their brain fit and healthy for a long time to come and not have more strokes. So though it's really, really important that these problems are followed up so that we can rule out some of these sort of medical issues that may cause things. There are other medical problems. There's a very strong correlation between diabetes and memory problems, and in both directions, actually. So people who develop Alzheimer's disease are also more prone to developing a diabetes or a sugar, difficulty processing sugar. It's always very interesting to me because if you go into care settings, very often there are lots of sweet things around and lots of biscuits and things, but actually it's not a particularly good thing for people who have memory problems. Sugar levels and memory performance are really highly correlated, so keeping a regular even sugar level is very, very important, and having sweet things after a meal is much, much better. So, but sometimes a memory problems may, because sugar levels so directly affect our memory, sometimes it's really, really important to just be aware that somebody may actually have a diabetes or some other sort of problem that's leading them to present with memory problems. Things like depression and anxiety can also present in a similar way. So someone has a severe episode of either depression or long-term anxiety. Both of those things will cause memory problems. Heavy use of alcohol or sudden heavy use of alcohol or even withdrawal from alcohol can cause quite a lot of neurological problems, including memory problems. Any changes to medication, particularly things like antibiotics, but quite a lot of medications will affect cognition if there are changes or someone goes on to or they're asked to come off of a drug. So those things can also massively impact on people's memory. Things like sensory impairments. So sometimes what presents as a memory problem is simply that people are not hearing properly, forgetting to wear their hearing aids, or just don't even know they have a hearing problem. Or likewise, they may have developed a large cataract and it's happened so gradually they've not been aware of it, but it means that they're not taking in their environment so well. And the last one that I just really wanted to kind of briefly mention, because I think it's particularly relevant, is delirium. And it's just important to look out for delirium because this is a temporary state that occurs in people, but usually for a medical reason. So and it will present exactly like a kind of so it's a period of intense confusion and disorientation, which often can be misread. If you meet somebody in a medical setting for the first time and they're presenting with these problems, it's easy to assume that they've got a dementia, when in fact this may just be a temporary period of delirium. So delirium tends to come on quite quickly. People will have problems concentrating or focusing their attention. They struggle to maintain a kind of directed stream of thought. They can become quite restless. Their speech may become rambling and incoherent. They'll be bewildered, confused, disorientated, very forgetful about recent events. They might mistake unfamiliar surroundings for familiar ones, or vice versa. They can be quite emotional, quite erratic behaviour, and they may even have physical symptoms like quite a flushed face and raised blood pressure, and sometimes they can completely lose contact with reality. And just to say, this has been one of the early signs of COVID in elderly people, so it's really important that we don't assume that because someone seems confused that they've got the early stages of dementia, or that it's just an expression of their dementia. They may be experiencing a delirious episode. And this is, I'm not going to go into detail here, but just to say it's very often misdiagnosed. It can be missed. Up to 40% of people in a delirious state can die. So it's very important to look out for. And the kinds of things that might cause it drug intoxications, and that includes prescribed drugs like antibiotics, drug withdrawal reactions, some kind of nutritional imbalance like a sugar or a something like potassium or magnesium. Infections and fevers can cause it. Somebody may go into that post-surgery, or if they've got heart failure or pneumonia. So it's really important that if you notice a period of confusion that is escalating quite quickly, even if someone has a dementia, that they are checked out for these kind of medical sort of possibilities. And also that if you go with someone into a medical setting and they are presenting in this way, it's really important to the person in the medical setting that you explain that this behaviour is unusual and different to normal. So finally, what can you do? I think if you are concerned about somebody, the first thing to do is to start making notes about what you've seen. It's really, really helpful for people like me if I've got some kind of history. When did this start? What was the first thing you noticed? How often was it happening? What were the circumstances in which it happened? So keeping a bit of a diary can be really, really helpful. Look out for anything else, all the sorts of things that I've mentioned that could be leading somebody to present with memory problems and confusion even when they don't have a dementia. So something else that might be causing it. Of course, it's really important to consult the GP and to take these steps forward, but also to be very aware that in people who are intelligent and educated, either or both, they are particularly likely for the GP to say they haven't got a problem and be sent home, only for us to find out, a year later, 2 years later, that there is a problem. So when that is the case, this is where things like the diary becomes really, really important, and being able to reference the kinds of things that I've said about getting lost and so on. And also sometimes being particularly, pushy, I suppose, about making sure that a person is referred on when you have really good reason to think that the problems that they're experiencing go above and beyond what might be normal. And also, in the meantime, there's loads of protective steps that people can take, and I've talked about these many times, but good diet, regular exercise, looking after people's general health, making sure that they get good regular sleep, using memory supports. There's never anything bad in using memory supports, and just helping people to keep their stress levels down. That's a very brief run through, but I hope that has been useful for you. Thank you.